Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
A Revealed Past by LyricalPiece. After docking at a new island, the Straw Hats are captured by a group of scientists who want to extract their memories to farm information. Realizing Sanji is a Vinsmoke, the scientists believe his memories are the key to stealing Germa's advanced technology. The cook's secrets of his past are revealed on screen, and his crew have a hard time accepting what they're seeing. Adios.
Sanji needed to get out of there. Zoro stood there in shaking silence, two swords still in his hands, an eye uncharacteristically wet with anger. With frustration. With an aching sympathy Zoro couldn't even describe, because that was his crew member these bastards had mentally slaughtered. That was his partner they had emotionally drained. Pudding and Hollowell and the Vinsmokes alike. And he had had enough of watching this shit and of making the cook relive every gut-wrenching attack on his character. The Straw Hats as a collective were feeling agonizingly the same. They had so much they wanted to tell their cook. So much that they needed their crewmate to know. Like that he wasn't responsible for his family's actions or the Charlotte family's. Or that he didn't deserve the ways he'd been treated. Or that everything he was hearing in this excruciatingly ruthless moment wasn't true. Sanji's life had shown him unrelenting cruelty, and he wasn't responsible for most of the crap he's had to deal with throughout his eventful life. All he was responsible for was how he dealt with it. And the crew needed him to know just how courageous and strong and resilient he was because, damn it, nobody deserved to be so viciously mocked for caring, for being human. Especially not their goddamn cook, their sweet, goofy, protective, clever, reliable, hard-headed, graceful, wholehearted, twirly master chef who took care of them. Who laughed with them and cried with them and fought alongside them. Who shared dreams with them, and advice, and comfort, and they needed to get Sanji out of there. Out of his memories. Out of that crappy neural headpiece that shadowed his eyes but not the streams of tears falling from them. Charlotte Pudding, however, just wouldn't stop. It must be embarrassing to have such a dim-witted brother. 8 pairs of eyes flashed with a never-ending fury. Yeah, he's so dumb, Rabian snickered. Zoro wanted to slaughter these self-righteous assholes. Nitro interrupted their ridiculing as he inspected his confined Vinsmoke. Hey, it looks like our little hostage is gonna pass out soon. Reiju, indeed, looked ready to collapse, left leg drenched in the blood that flowed freely and unchecked. Yeah, Rabian agreed, solemn that their fun was probably over. That's a lot of blood loss. If we leave her like this, she might be dead before morning. Well, that would save us some trouble, wouldn't it? Nitro shrugged. Ya thoughts, Miss Puddin'? The fun is over, Pudding replied with a sigh. If she croaks, that'll ruin our whole plan, and that won't do. We still want her to attend tomorrow's ceremony. Huh? Do they expect her to remain quiet about all this? Usopp wondered grumpily. Pudding sauntered her way over to Reiju with a wicked grin. The whole world needs a front row seat to the Vinsmoke family execution. Reiju could barely keep conscious. Listen close, dear sister-in-law, I can't have you bleeding to death on us. And I certainly don't want to risk you ratting on me for all my unladylike behavior tonight. Before Reiju could even process what could possibly be implied by such words, Pudding's manicured nails found a spot on the side of Reiju's temple before sinking her entire hand through her skin as if she was made of fudge. The Straw Hats' eyes widened. What is that? Several of them yelled in shock. What is this? Reiju demanded. The Vinsmoke felt the odd feeling of fear wash over her. Just relax. It won't take long. Pudding began to dig around in Reiju's mind. She could do that the whole time? Nami shrieked. Why didn't Sanji warn us? Cried Chopper. That's terrifying. What is she even doing? Usopp didn't know if he wanted to lean closer to see, or to scoot as far back from the screen as possible. As Pudding's hand re-emerged, a strip of film came with her, the other end still attached somewhere inside Reiju's head. The pictures being portrayed on the film strip seemed to be the conversation Sanji had just overheard. A strip of Reiju's memories? Chopper squealed. Oh, come on. Pudding smiled. That wasn't so bad, right? Everyone carries unpleasant memories and trauma we would rather forget. How wonderful would it be not to remember all that nonsense? This is the power of the memo fruit. Pudding ran her fingers over the part of the memory she was looking for and smirked, an image of her being the one who shot Reiju in the leg. Germa 66's technology sure is something. Despite being shot in the leg, you dragged yourself pretty far. Not that it matters. Ahahaha. Another strip appeared, separate from Reiju's. I'll just paste this memory of a soldier who was hit by a stray bullet here, a quick edit. The Straw Hats watched, mouths agape, as Pudding manipulated Reiju's memories like it was an art project. So not only can she gain access to someone's memories, but she can keep the snippets she alters, Robin said, a chill running down her spine. And add someone else's memories into another's, Nami added. How many memories has she stolen? Usopp gulped. How many does she have stowed away? There was an immediate uneasiness among the Straw Hats, even as Hollowell clicked his tongue in intrigue. Charlotte Pudding's mind-altering devil fruit power would fit in nicely there at Hollowell Mind Tech. When Pudding was done editing, the strange film strip slid back into Reiju's mind with a snap, and the pink woman immediately passed out. Call the soldiers and have them take her to the ward. As the harsh chaos inside died down, the memory panned back outside before fading into nothingness. Outside, Sanji was already gone, slipping away just as silently as he arrived. Flowers leaned delicately against the wall as a parting gift to the brutal truth. None of it was true, though. Nami sniffed angrily, not knowing if she wanted to continue crying or yelling, because it all seemed appropriate as far as she was concerned. Sanji shouldn't have had to deal with all this alone. So just brutal, Frankie agreed, more solemn than he'd ever been before. Please tell me he stayed long enough to witness her power, Robin prayed. When Sanji's memory faded back in, the scene displayed was the whole Cake Chateau medical ward. There was a single occupied bed where Reiju slowly woke, eyes fluttering, cautious. Where am I? From the far corner of the room, a familiar flick sounded. Sanji. Reiju shot up and immediately winced in pain. She glared down at her bandaged left side. I hurt my leg. Sanji took a slow drag, surprisingly calm. Do you recall how you got hurt? Or what happened? He asked her. I remember, walking around the castle and then coming across some soldiers who were shouting about intruders. I must have gotten involved somehow. Reiju, think harder, Sanji demanded, calm facade breaking. That's not it, he sighed. Your memories were overwritten. That's good. Sanji did see what happened, Chopper said. Robin nodded, before adding, none of you were alone with her, I hope. Whenever Pudding was around we were with each other, Nami said, the others nodding. But would she have just altered all our memories? The navigator threw her head against her knees. Now we can't even trust our own memories? There's no way she would have been able to do anything when we were together, Luffy said, and the others were quick to agree. However, there was one person they couldn't be sure of. Zoro gritted his teeth in worry. Did she do something to him? How would they even know if she had? Sanji inhaled slowly, letting the nicotine calm his adrenaline once more before addressing Reiju again. I'll fill you in. But let me warn you, the truth is damn ugly. The memory jumped forward, information clearly relayed, and Reiju could only stare at her brother. Think I'm lying? Sanji tried after a moment of silence. Reiju's eyes softened. I don't. I know you would never mislead me. She looked away from him, contemplative. I was wary of Pudding, but never imagined her to be this Diak agreed. More than devious, Chopper grumbled, eyes still wet and angry. Sanji seemed surprised. You noticed something off? I had my suspicions. She just seemed a little too perfect for me, so I thought I should eavesdrop a bit. Robin quite appreciated Reiju the more she learned of the woman. Sanji glowered at the floor, shaking. I didn't know a damn thing. God, he was an idiot. How could he be so stupid, so blind? Oh, Usopp mumbled, eyes scrunching. I really screwed up. The sniper, Frankie, and Brooke snapped their fingers in unison. There it is, they sang. The cook's thoughts are becoming more obvious to everybody now, Zoro thought, rolling his good eye. On the plus side, he wouldn't be able to fake his feelings anymore and lie. Although, he was sure the cook himself wouldn't see that as a plus. I assumed if I accepted the marriage, they would spare my crewmates. It turns out that was never in the cards. Sanji threw his head in his hands. It was all a ploy, he spat. Of course they were blowing smoke up my ass. I thought everything would work out if I took one for the team. His fingers tangled into his hair and tightened in anger. anger with himself. I never took notice of that habit of his until seeing it so many times in his memories, Robin commented. Hair pulling, is he trying to hide? Relieve stress? It is a common response to cope with trauma, Chopper said. Everyone in the crew had their odd quirks and habits the doctor assumed formed from whatever experiences their childhood elicited. Sanji's was the only one he was witnessing almost firsthand. What kind of fantasy world was I living in? Sanji growled at himself. I should have known better. Desperation and anxiety do crazy things to one's mind, Brook hummed. Though of course he will blame himself. Zoro groaned. Reiju seemed as taken aback as his crewmates. They fooled our father, too, she said, blinking at him, trying to understand his thought process. He's a wise man, but he was undone by his arrogance. He's dealing with an emperor. He should have been more cautious. And now it's far too late. After a moment, she continued, softer. This still might play out for the best, though. I believe that Germa should be destroyed. Sanji snapped out of his own self-pity. I'd like to pretend I'm ignorant, Reiju said. And let Big Mom carry out her plan. Huh? Luffy scratched his head. That's stupid. Don't be stupid, Sanji growled. They'll kill you tomorrow, too, Reiju. His sister looked at him with a grin. It my little brother concerned for me. Then she sighed. Leave the past where it lies. We're beyond that. You don't owe me a single thing. I only helped you once before. She also patched him up, Chopper noted, and was probably going to warn him about Pudding's betrayal. And it's Sanji, Luffy smiled. Yeah, Zoro shrugged. He already cares too much for her to let her get hurt. The swordsman suddenly knew his cook wasn't just going to walk away from his obnoxious family if they were in danger, and he sighed. Reiju met Sanji's eyes. Firm. Go find the Straw Hats and leave this island, Sanji. Like hell. I can't do that. What do you think would happen to the Bharati? Just run. Figure that out after you've escaped. Stay here, and all of you will die. Sanji stared at her, uncomprehending what she was asking him to do, because to him, it wasn't even a consideration to abandon her. Sanji, you have to live, for our mother's sake. Sanji froze. Why bring her up? Because there's one memory I can't forget. There was a fight between our parents. I was just a child at the time, so I didn't understand the catalyst of mother's resentment of father until much later, but it's obvious in retrospect. While our mother was still carrying the four of you, she was quite adamant against turning quadruplets into cold-blooded killing machines. Sanji's memory converged with Reiju's words, and suddenly the scene before them was of their parents, surrounded by the dull gray of Germa. You're not serious, Sanji's mother was saying as a tiny Reiju listened quietly by the open doorway. Of course I am, Judge scoffed. Never, how could you do that to them? Enough, he was running out of patience with his emotional wife. Surgery is already arranged. The woman grabbed pleadingly now at her husband's chest. Don't do this. These are my children, as well. I beg you, please, Judge, they need their humanity. Being human won't cut it, Judge responded, towering over the woman. Not when monsters win wars. The woman stepped back, realizing the true monster was standing in front of her. Perhaps he was right, but there was more to life than war and death and pain. She wanted so much more for her children than what she had received, than what she had witnessed. She'd already made the mistake with her firstborn, and if the technology had been perfected now. Our end goal is to reclaim North Blue by force and restore it to its former glory, Judge was saying. Accomplishing that vision will take incredible strength. Which is the reason I give this gift to my own progeny. He says it like he really believes it's a blessing of some kind, Nami said. There is no reasoning with a madman, Brook said sadly. At Judge's command, Germa doctors had grabbed his wife by the arms. Take her away. The woman struggled, and Reiju ran to hide. Judge wouldn't listen to his wife's crying pleas that this was their family he was sacrificing. No family, to the king, was meant for strengthening the bloodline, nothing more. Sheesh, how'd she even wind up marrying him? Usopp wondered. Doubt she had much say in it, if I were to guess, Zoro muttered. Could it be the cook also inherited his insanely bad luck, too? Zoro figured it was as possible as anything else. Poor Sanji's mom, Chopper whispered. They forced the surgery on her. Reiju's adult voice echoed across the black screen. But, our mother took a toxin in an attempt to foil our father's plan. Several Straw Hats gasped at this. Our father was furious. The screen blinked back to life as the beautiful blonde woman gulped down the bottle of toxin until every last drop was ingested. It took effect quickly. Blood was coughed up right before she collapsed. Judge ran into the room at the sound, soldiers and doctors hot on his trail. "No," he shouted, spotting the empty bottle beside her prone form. "What did you just do?" The screen went black, and Reiju spoke. It was a powerful drug, strong enough to affect the manipulated bloodline elements. Hollowell tilted his head. Tishishi. Of course their drugs would be advanced as well for their purposes. It will all be ours in time, Tishishishishi. What the hell did that mean? The crew collectively wondered. Unfortunately, Reiju's voice continued. It wasn't enough. It didn't take long before superhuman-like abnormalities began appearing in our brothers' bodies. Another flashback appeared. A Germa doctor was praising the success of the operation, and Judge was relieved that their genetic blueprints were not altered in any which way by the toxin by that soft woman. Soft? The chick drank poison to protect her children. That's tough as hell, Frankie boasted. That's why she was sick, Chopper realized with a sad gasp. The scene changed to Sanji's mother laying in a familiar hospital bed, tears streaming silently onto her pillow, before going back to Judge and the doctor. Just then, a yellow onesie-clad toddler waddled up to them with a bucket and garden shovel in his tiny hands. "Baby Sanji," Robin and Nami crooned without warning. Cheeks even rounder with cute baby fat, and a bandage already taped to his chubby little forehead, baby Sanji smiled eagerly up at his father with bright, hopeful eyes that scrunched at the corners. "You wanna play?" toddler Sanji asked hopefully. Judge and the doctor frowned at the boy. Master Sanji, on the other hand, the doctor told the king, is falling behind. Well, perhaps his development is a bit delayed. Toddler Sanji tilted his head, unaware of what any of the words meant. He just wanted to play. "I'd play with baby Sanji," Luffy said with a laugh. Zoro, however, was fixated on the phrasing of his development being delayed. Was it postponed? Inactive until the raid suit was used. And now, no, the cook had come out on the other side of Wano still himself. It had to be over. Nothing was changing. The scene shifted to a slightly older Sanji being chased up a tree by a rabid dog. "What is with Sanji and being chased by dogs?" Usopp said. "Believe me, being chased by dogs is no fun," Brook mumbled, remembering his time with the minks. No fun at all. Once safely up in the tree, Sanji's cowering was abruptly halted when he heard some high-pitched. He climbed further toward the tweeting, and found a nest of singing baby birds. His fear all but forgotten, he smiled. "You must be hungry," was the first thing he said. There were several chuckles. "Just 1 second. Little Sanji dug around in his pockets and pulled out some seeds he had found in the yard he was saving for later. The baby birds needed them more, though, so he offered them over and the creatures started happily pecking away, much to little Sanji's delight. The doctor had appeared below him, closely monitoring the boy as promised, and dropped his clipboard in surprise. "Wah? Master Sanji is feeding animals." Judge was beside him in an instant. He was supposed to be devoid of emotions, he complained. 1 out of 4, he growled, knowing exactly who to blame for this imperfection. "Sora? Sora? His mother's name is Sora?" Chopper said, surprised as he realized something at the same time as Usopp. "Isn't Sora the protagonist in those North Blue comics Sanji's family was written into as the bad guys?" The sniper questioned, rubbing his chin. "That's funny," Luffy chortled. "It can't be a coincidence," Robin said. The memory returned to Whole Cake Medical Ward. "You were growing," Reiju told Sanji. "But not as father wanted. Thanks to our mother's efforts, you had compassion. Meanwhile, our mother got weaker and weaker due to the long-term effects caused by the poison." Sanji was already sitting up straighter, horrified at all of it, because she died, he whispered. "Because of me? Damn it, Sanji, no." Reiju took instant offense. "Nonsense, don't think that way." Nami clapped her hands together. "Thank you, Reiju. Honestly, that cook of ours." She shook her head, just as fond as she was exasperated. Zoro also shook his head, a clear chuckle deep in his throat. That idiot Dark Bro really was gonna drive him insane, wasn't he? Reiju sighed at her brother. "Listen," the memory converged backwards in time again. Mother? Little Reiju poked her head into Sora's room, and the woman smiled in delight, looking better than she had in days. She brought her child into a giant hug and asked how her father was treating her. But little Reiju frowned. The only thing he wants to do is make us train, she complained. It's dumb. He's only happy when Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji get stronger. I see, Sora said, her soft smile never faltering. Reiju wondered why she was in such a good mood. Why she looked so bright. Then she noticed a tray on her bed table. What is that? Oh, Sora's ocean eyes sparkled. Take a look, Sanji cooked me a meal all by himself. Remember when we cried when Sanji was trying to cure his mom with his food? Frankie wept dramatically. Well maybe, he sniffled. Robin smiled softly, finishing the shipwright's thought. Maybe, in a way, he did. Stop saying these things, Chopper and Nami cried, bawling. Another memory filtered in of little Reiju once again visiting her mother. Sora was petting her hair, but her words were only for Sanji, bragging, proud. Guess what Sanji told me today? That boy is so sweet. When she pulled away, her lips quivered and eyes watered. He said, get better soon. This made Sora bawl. He's the best son ever. The bar's not set very high, though, is it? Usopp said, but was cut off by a wave of Chopper's hoof. Having proof of any ounce of compassion is momentous in that family, Chopper huffed. Luffy was laughing. He is the best son ever, he brings food. A bead of sweat dropped down Usopp's head. Luffy's bar's not set very high, either. As another memory formed, adult Reiju spoke once again. You brought our mother genuine happiness, every day. The memory solidified. Little Reiju. In her mother's hospital ward bedroom. Sanji's hurt again, she was informing her mother. Sora had seemed more tired than usual, so Reiju tried to bring up Sanji. Didn't matter what it was about. He got beat up by my brothers like he always does. That boy's so weak. Through her exhaustion, Sora only smiled. I see. After a moment of Sora staring idly out the window with that same soft, tired smile, Reiju wondered if she should call a nurse, but then her mother pulled her close. I'm sorry, Reiju. Your mother is very sick. I wish I could watch you grow up. Sadly, I don't think I can make it, but... She never continued, only smiled. Full of joy. Now I understand why she smiled that day, adult Reiju said. As Sora's image slowly faded away, she didn't lament what happened to you or regret her choice to poison herself. She was content in her decision. Because she knew Sanji being weak only meant his humanity was strong, Chopper noted. And that's all she ever wanted for him, Robin smiled. Little Sanji appeared before a young Reiju. He was crying at their mother's grave. Judge walked up behind them with the other three boys in tow. What are you doing here? He demanded at the blonde. Huh? Dad? Sanji whimpered, rubbing his eyes. Judge stomped over and crushed the flowers Sanji had picked for his mom under his heavy soles. The straw hats were back to glaring. Flowers for the dead is a pointless rite, Judge said. You're proving your uselessness. Intense, unfathomably irritated glaring. Little Sanji frowned, and then began to cry harder. These tears were angry. Furious in his grief. He wailed and raised his fists as he ran toward his father. Yanji kicked him back before he could land a hit. Stop your crying, the green-haired child said, as the other two boys knocked Sanji in his back, flinging him forward again. Sanji landed face first in the dirt of his mother's gravesite. The boys laughed, and Judge commanded the boys and Reiju follow him. They left Sanji, useless, in his heartache. Our father's beliefs were completely contrary to our mother's, adult Reiju said as the memory completely dispersed. Sitting in her hospital bed, Reiju's eyes had softened tremendously. For a moment, she didn't look like the trained assassin she was created to be. That's why he could never accept who you were, Sanji. He blamed you for everything that happened and lashed out at you as punishment. That's why Sanji continuously feels responsible for everything that goes wrong. Even now, Robin said somberly. Trauma could do that to a person. Reiju whispered, even though mother has passed, she's still here. Reiju looked up at her brother with rare tears in her blue eyes and their mother's smile on her lips. Her kindness lives on in you. Sanji's breath hitched. Teeth clenched down on the butt of his cigarette. His own gaze shook. Needless to say, you are no failure. Luffy beamed, the Straw Hats smiled, and Zoro's tension finally relaxed. The swordsman wouldn't be completely relaxed until the cook was safe, and part of him even felt he'd never be able to relax fully again after this. But, after their captain's declaration at the clearing of their duel, these were the words the curly-browed idiot needed to hear the most, and someone had finally said them. "Our mother selflessly gave her life to protect you and your humanity," Reiju told Sanji. "You're the future mother wanted to see. That's why you're more kind and tender than anyone." There was a patent piece that washed over THN smoke Sora did live on in Sanji. Everything she fought for, everything she believed in, everything she was. Sora had given their dear friend a chance at humanity, and Sanji had fought for it his whole life without realizing that that was what he was fighting for. He grew up with everything battling against that very humanity, and he had stuck it out and made it. He persevered and succeeded, just like he always had. Just like the Straw Hats knew he always would. That was their Sanji. Sora had sacrificed herself for, a move that Sanji would ultimately do for his nakama without hesitation. Like mother like son. She had, intentionally and not, been the reason he never quit on his dream to become a chef. When locked away in that dungeon, her words had inspired him. Her love and kindness. The never-ending affection and encouragement even in the small amounts he managed to sneak away to get, was what spared him. The courage it took to stop the mutations to his bloodline in its tracks, no matter the cost to her, had defended Sanji's humanity. Ultimately, her compassion had protected him. A definite kindness he had absorbed and used to protect others. Zoro and the crew had Sora to thank for saving for Sanji. They had Zeph to thank for caring for Sanji, and now, they straightened with a unified purpose. They would take it from here. Sanji's mind raced a mile a minute, bombarded with too much new information at once. From Pudding's deceit to Big Mom's true intentions to his mother's will and sister's words, Sanji didn't exactly know what to process first. All he'd managed to accomplish during the time Reiju was out cold was to dry off and get his damn nicotine fix before he completely fell apart. Fuck, how could Reiju believe he wasn't a failure? Look at him, hadn't she just witnessed his stupidity? Hadn't she suffered because of it? How could he think any of that was his fault? Nami questioned, disbelieving. "This is Sanji we're talking about," Usopp casually responded. She was saying he wasn't a failure because of their mother? Sanji never knew what had caused his mother's illness. Never knew her sacrifice or her secrets. All he knew of her was the love she had for him, and that even with the constant fear that he'd disappointed her in some way, she never made him feel useless or incapable. And if his success to her was that he had retained his humanity, it didn't fix that he had fucked up this badly. Having emotions was pointless if he still couldn't do anything right, if he still couldn't protect the people he cared about. The Straw Hats were frowning. On one hand, their cook had a terrible streak of self-worth issues. On the other, they had each felt the same way at some point or another. Humanity was a fine line to walk. Leaning too much into confidence would make you arrogant, but leaning too far away from it. The saying, "everything in moderation," truly meant everything, and the crew supposed it was those who you cherished that kept you balanced, and vice versa. Now that they were more in tune with Sanji's darker tendencies, they could be better friends for him. It was what friends were for, after all. "What is there to think about?" Reiju demanded, snapping Sanji out of his thoughts. "You know in your heart what you should do." Sanji gulped. "Just abandon Germa and flee to safety. It represents nothing but destruction, clinging to the glories of the past. The world would be better off without us. Listen, all Big Mom wants is our military technology. I highly doubt she's interested in taking your mentor's life." It was a fair assessment. Not even the things Sanji cared about most in the world were important enough to his enemies. He was just a pawn. A throwaway to everybody. "That's not true," Chopper said. Zoro grimaced, more and more annoyed at the cook's thoughts. He wanted to know if their present-day cook still thought like this. "After the wedding tomorrow," Reiju said, "our father and brothers will all be dead, remember? So, it's fine. They can't carry out the threat, either. Glorified murderers, that's what our family has always been." "You know I can't stand those pretentious jerks," Sanji whispered, blonde fringe hanging low. "But why do you have to die, Reiju?" Reiju looked softly at him. "I still have my emotions intact, but father augmented me so I'm unable to disobey him." "We were right," Robin said, pitying the woman. "There's no way out, Sanji. And I have blood on my hands. I deserve death. But how is it her fault if she was literally forced to do it? Nami said, brow furrowed. Another martyr in the family, perhaps, Brooke hummed, without the self-deprecation aspect. She also spent a lot of time with their mother, Robin said. Luffy frowned. If he had known about Reiju, he wouldn't have left Whole Cake without her freedom set, too. There had to still be a way to get her out. Get rid of Judge and she doesn't have anyone to obey. Frankie gave a thumbs up, super simple. Sanji struggled to clear his head. To focus. There was no way Reiju deserved to die. He didn't even want to think how much she's had to witness and the things she was forced to carry out with no free will all these years. There had to be another way. Sanji, don't think. Just run. But, oh, and those bracelets on you? I promise that they won't explode. I swapped them out for normal ones. Sanji's eyes widened as he glanced down. His hands were safe? Oh, bless that woman, Nami sighed. See? Reiju even finds loopholes in her orders when she can, Chopper said. Sanji was right. She doesn't deserve any fate like the others. Well, it's fine because nothing happened to them. Spoiler Luffy. Usopp whined. Zoro raised an eyebrow. Nothing happened to them. If they weren't dead like they should be, they still deserved to get their asses handed to them. Sanji flexed his fingers. His hands weren't at risk. It was like a weight was lifted. One less thing to worry about. 100 more to go. He sighed. It didn't matter if his hands were free if his destiny wasn't. If there was no way to save Reiju, then there was no way to save himself. He was doomed just the same. Zoro narrowed his eye. What's he planning to do? Nothing. When Nami, Brooke, and Chopper avoided his eye contact, he grimaced. Don't tell me he's gonna walk right into that wedding knowing it's a trap. Not exactly, Brooke chuckled to ease their easily angered, protective swordsman. A dark aura surrounded Zoro, and a bead of sweat dropped down the skeleton's forehead. Yoho. You're frightening. Reiju huffed in annoyance now at her brother's lack of resolve. What other reason could be keeping you here, honestly? Would you pull it together? Wake up. You need to think about what really matters. Wish it was that simple, Sanji murmured, thinking about Luffy and the crew. As if sensing his thoughts, Reiju said, you have wonderful friends. Luffy smiled. Yeah. Sanji bit his lip. Yeah, he did. The words she left him with next hit him harder than anything. People like that only come once in a lifetime. The Straw Hats looked around at each other. We are pretty great, Usopp finally said, breaking their sentimental silence. Especially me. Oh, please, Nami laughed, making Chopper giggle and the others grin. They really couldn't imagine their crew without each of their friends. The good and the bad, their found family. Sanji was out of the medical ward in the next shift of memory, still carrying the soggy picnic basket of forgotten food. He didn't walk very far before slumping onto a bench designed like a biscuit to smoke as he replayed Reiju's words. His family, his friends, there was too much. But maybe he wasn't a complete failure. Everyone's eyebrows shot up. Everything Judge had shamed him for were the exact things Sora had hoped were part of him to begin with. And if it was his mother's kindness that made him such a big disappointment to the rest of his family, then he could be proud of that, couldn't he? Yes, be proud. Chopper fervently agreed. It took him years to shake off whatever subconscious attachment he had to Vinsmoke Judge. To stop caring about what the vile man would think about him, even if the fear that others would think of him the same way always haunted him. But if his mother apparently only wanted him to be human, he had done that, hadn't he? He had refused to become like his brothers. And he kept cooking. Reiju might have been right after all. Sanji wasn't a total letdown. He hadn't once failed his mother. He hadn't once sacrificed any of the principles he'd learned from Zeph. He helped people the best he could because it was the right thing to do. He never struck a woman no matter how much danger he was in. He made sure that nobody knew hunger as long as he was around, friend or enemy. He might not have made it to greatest chef in the world, but he had become a master at his craft nonetheless. Sora had asked him to never stop cooking, and he didn't, no matter what life had thrown at him. That had to count for something. It did, Chopper wailed. Frankie was just as weepy. Keep talking like that, bro. Yeah. So, if this was all his life was, if this was all it would be. Frankie and Chopper paused mid-congratulatory sob. Wait, what? He had at least accomplished something. Despite Judge's best efforts to crush his emotions and his dreams, Sanji had discovered what it was to love people, and had cooked meals for thousands. A better life than a lot of people had the privilege of having. Through it all, so many people had lied to him, laughed at him, and threatened him and anyone he associated with, including himself. So what if Reiju was right about his friends, too? She might have her emotions still, but she didn't understand honor. How could she? She hailed from a place where the concept didn't exist. Sanji could never return to his captain no matter how much he wanted to. No amount of apologizing or begging would ever be good enough to atone. He had also made Nami cry. It was reprehensible, yeah. He could admit what he truly wanted. He could admit that he missed them miserably. Luffy and Nami and Frankie and Brook and Robin and Usopp and Chopper and that goddamn insufferable algae-headed idiot who sent his heart and body into a frenzy for no good reason. Zoro, despite being irritated by this train of thoughts, had to hold back a small smirk. He preferred being the only one rooted in the cook's head enough to get crappy nicknames. Sanji missed his crew so much his heart fucking blistered. What he wanted more than anything, he couldn't even think it, because it was the one thing he didn't deserve after all this. No, say it, Chopper groaned as everyone else sighed. No matter Reiju's thoughts on the matter, Sanji was a walking disaster. He was a burden, and he was alone, and he always would be. Every Straw Hat had to bite their protests down. It was no use talking to a screen, after all. They just hated how their cook kept thinking these things. And still hated how they never knew his inner monologue was always this appalling. So, wasn't this for the best for everybody? I'm sorry, Luffy. There's no turning back now. Luffy frowned, but knew his friend would eventually sort things out for himself. The right way. The world would be better off wiping the name that plagued the seas off its maps entirely, and if the Vinsmokes were to be eliminated, it'd be best if they all were. Of course, he'd do everything he could to keep it from happening, for Reiju's sake if nothing else, he figured. But he also couldn't just leave them all, and he didn't know why fucking not. Zoro had to sigh. He was why his family was still alive, of course. A walking disaster, remember? Still deep in his thoughts, Sanji groaned, taking out the food he had made pudding to see if it was still salvageable. When he opened the bento box, he was surprised to realize something that should have been obvious about its contents from the start if his brain hadn't been fogged over with fantasies of hopeless love. Hang on, he muttered, double-checking. Did I cook this stuff for pudding? Man, what was I thinking? We know, Usopp waved it off. You made a meal fit for a crew. The sniper was cut off when the memory panned over the meal, because something was definitely familiar about it. The meat, Luffy drooled. It sparkles, yow, those hamburgers were made to please, Frankie exclaimed. Oh, his famous little sandwiches that I like are there, Robin smiled. Onigiri, they're all our favorites, Chopper realized, bawling. Sanji blinked. I made all their favorites out of habit. Sanji, Chopper sniffled. Well, at least none of it was ruined. He put the bento away and closed the lid with a heavy hand. It was all so frustrating. Even when he wasn't trying to, he was thinking about them. He crossed his arms and leaned his head into them, grimacing, fighting. Forget about them. You have to. No, you don't, Chopper and Usopp objected together. I don't have to worry about Luffy and the others, they'll get away on their own. Luffy pouted. He's right, but still, not without Sanji. The evil army of Vinsmokes will die, myself included, just the way Big Mom planned it. It's for the best. If she gets what she wants, it'll put an end to this. Like we wouldn't have taken revenge, Zoro muttered. Even if my life was short, at least it was a fulfilling one. Images of his mother spun through his head, always smiling and optimistic, and now Sanji knew why. She was happy to have him as her son even if he couldn't save her. And then Zeph appeared. Are you ready? Zeph asked with a smile at the opening of the Baratie. Because we're gonna be busy. We'll be just fine, young Sanji promised, because you got me. Zeph's smile widened, and the memory shifted to the same young Sanji drooling over the first pretty lady to step foot inside, a plate clattering to the floor. Oi! Zoro rolled his eye as the others chuckled. Why was he not surprised? Pay attention, brat. Zeph knocked him in the head. A slightly older Sanji was then struggling to saute multiple orders at once, and Zeph was yelling again. You're moving too slow, brat. No I'm not, old man. the stubborn Sanji retorted, even more determined to get it done. The memory then shifted to an older Zeph kicking a Sanji they all recognized, much older and stronger, and a smoking stick of death between his lips. "Stop fooling around with the ladies, you brat." The memories continued on a running loop, Sanji aging and growing and turning more and more into the Straw Hat cook he'd be one day. "Be quiet, brat. Stop it, you brat. Get back to work, brat. You little brat." And then, finally, a familiar Straw Hat led the blonde cook away from the restaurant he cherished so much, and Zeph peered from above deck, fond and bittersweet. "Hey, Sanji. Take care. Don't catch cold." Sanji broke, falling to his knees in tears. "Owner Zeph. Thank you for all the damn things you've done for me over all these years. I'll never forget your kindness for the rest of my life." Annoyed by him, nags at him, yet grows to love him, Brook murmured, bony finger to his chin. "Remind you of anyone?" Everyone looked at a certain swordsman. Zoro turned his head, ignoring that his cheeks were suddenly too warm. "So not our fault the cook's such a pain in the ass." But he was fighting a smile. Zeph's memories faded out like Sora's, and Luffy's giant grin took over, almost too big for the screen. Luffy cackled at himself. Gum Gum Bazooka. This straw-hatted idiot was taking on Don Krieg. He was overpowered and outnumbered, and yet. Sanji watched on in awe as their chore boy actually seemed to be winning, and Zeph's muttering wisdom spilled beside him. Is it about weapons to survive or a faith that conquers the fear of death? Faith? Gum Gum Giant Gavel. If Krieg's fleet and numerous weapons are all power, then the spear that Kid wields in his heart is also power. Zeph glanced over at his son. I know an idiot who's holding back that spear for a stupid reason. All Sanji ever thought about was others. Nobody should forego their life if they didn't have to, if it wasn't a sure win. They didn't have to sacrifice their dreams and aspirations like that. Except him. The memory jumped ahead to his resolve that day, a newfound inspiration, a faith in others and in himself. I'll come along on your journey to become the king of the pirates. Sanji smiled. I'll be the cook for your ship. Luffy leapt with a holler. I got a new friend. The Straw Hats couldn't help smiling warmly. The filtered memories faded out once again, and Sanji gripped at his hair until his pining was interrupted by an unknown presence. He hadn't noticed them approaching, too occupied, drowning in the tedious feelings of his past and present. Confused and startled, Sanji blinked up at the big mom soldier who was rummaging through Sanji's picnic basket. The hell, oh boy, food, the pirate was murmuring before he yanked out a cylindrical slab of meat, and Sanji stiffened. Hey, Luffy whined. Who just walks up to someone else's basket of food and starts picking through it? Nami trailed off, catching sight of her now pouting, clearly offended captain. She sighed in resignation, never mind. The pirate, head lifted, seemed to suddenly realize who the basket belonged to. Are you Sanji Vinsmoke? They said you were asleep in your room? Sanji looked from the man to the meat and back up again. This man was just going to steal and eat the food he made for. Sanji, you're my chef. Sanji's skin prickled as an echo of his captain's cry pierced through him. I'm not eating another bite of anything, unless you cook it. No, he didn't make this food for pudding at all. He made it for. Luffy started grinning again. If you leave me here, I'll just starve to death. Wide blue eyes watched as the soldier grasped at the bone and raised the meat higher. Sanji gritted his teeth and growled, eyes suddenly raging, get your hands off. Huh? You heard me. That food's not for you? Sanji's foot went slamming into the man's skull. The slab of meat flew into the air as the guard went flying and Sanji caught it with lithe hands. Sanji had to catch his breath, startled by his own actions. Where did that emotion come from? He just attacked one of Big Mom's soldiers. Zoro took a moment to close his eye in gentle satisfaction. No matter what inner conflicts Sanji went through, even from the very beginning, Zoro knew the crew would always come first to him. Sanji's heart and his resolve were reasons the swordsman never hesitated to trust the arrow cook. He would always do what he felt was right. Whatever. It didn't matter. Reiju was right. He knew in his heart what he had to do. In a split-second decision, Sanji snatched up the basket with the rest of the food and bolted. Suddenly, he was on a mission. Even if, logically, Sanji didn't know what the hell he was doing, he did know that he needed to feed his stubbornly faithful captain. One last time, It was late and dark, and Sanji ran through the flooded streets of Sweet City with a wicker basket in his hand and his captain in his thoughts. The rendezvous point, where Luffy swore he would wait for Sanji to return, was far off. It would take him longer to get there on foot than riding a carriage, especially with the inclement weather. But Sanji was on a mission. He was bringing that food to his captain no matter what. The Straw Hats were smiling as Brook hummed. This is eerily parallel to little Sanji bringing food to his mother. Sneaking out alone. Going against what's expected of him in order to take care of someone important. His thought process is practically exact, Robin noted in agreement. Even the weather's similar, Nami said. Midway, a stray dog jumped out to bite at Sanji. He jumped back with a curse. Another dog, too? Usopp asked incredulously. This was getting out of hand. Sanji only reiterated words he had said long ago. I didn't make this food for you. Unlike his younger self, however, this Sanji was strong enough to simply pry the dog off and hold him back. The animal was clearly just hungry, and the kind chef's eyes softened. I'm sorry, boy, but there's somebody really important that I gotta give this to. There was no room for distractions. Sanji had wasted enough time if Luffy truly hadn't eaten anything since before Sanji's reunion with him. And knowing the Straw Hat had to have escaped Big Mom's captivity, he was probably shriveling up somewhere in dire need of sustenance. Luffy laughed. Yep, I sure was. Usopp side-eyed him and mumbled, why are you proud of that? So you made it back to the clearing then? Frankie questioned. Of course, Luffy huffed. I said I was. Actually, at first I was trying to find Sanji at the chateau to warn him about pudding, but I ran into his sister first. She told me Sanji already knew about the plan, so I wasn't as worried anymore. Luffy grinned easily. I knew I just had to make it back to the rendezvous point. Frankie gave a thumbs up. That's our captain. Rain made the pathways sticky in most places and muddy in the rest, and the wind did nothing but push back. Sanji struggled to keep his footing as well as the food safely covered. Things were going to get messy fast if he didn't pick up the pace. His only goal was reaching the clearing with the basket still intact. When he finally made it, his slippery feet slid to halt. The blood-soaked aftermath of a fight Luffy had clearly lost was what greeted him. The field was stained with chess-piece soldiers and littered with abandoned spears, guns, and katanas. In the distance, Sanji made out the gigantic tree Nami and Luffy had rode in on uprooted and split down the middle. Yeesh, that looked bad, Usopp commented at the sight. Nami only grimaced at the memory of that terrible place. The bitter chill howled in the silence as not a single standing soul was visible across the clearing. Sanji started to worry again. Luffy and Nami were captured by the army. Sanji already knew that. But seeing they hadn't gone quietly was a lot harder to grasp. They had clearly put up a fight. Zoro shrugged. When does Luffy ever go quietly? You're one to talk, Nami grumbled at him. And hadn't Nami said Luffy was already worn from battling one of Big Mom's generals the previous night before he was then kicked apart by Sanji himself? The reminder churned dread through Sanji's stomach like butter. Regardless of his own despicable actions, what if he was too late? What if a tired Luffy didn't have the strength necessary to escape because Sanji had left him to starve? He's already blaming himself, Chopper squeaked. It's a new record, isn't it? Robin asked Usopp as she and Frankie leaned over the sniper like they were having a secret meeting. Their reindeer companion flailed. Were you guys keeping tabs? What if Luffy did escape, only to come back here just to die of starvation instead? What if? No, Sanji shook his head, concentrating. He couldn't allow himself to think these things. Had to have faith. Luffy promised him. He said he'd be waiting. So where the hell are you? Sanji bolted through the battlefield, digging out any body that looked even remotely similar to a scruffy-haired pirate with a straw hat, flinging corpses around with a frenzy only the beating of his racing heart could match. With minutes past, Sanji didn't know if he was relieved he hadn't found Luffy in this graveyard yet or frustrated. The more Sanji ran, the more the rain and mud infiltrated the basket, and Sanji was feeling more and more hopeless. Did Sanji have it all wrong? Maybe Luffy wasn't here. Maybe he had given up on Sanji. Sanji wouldn't blame him. Luffy pursed his lips. That's stupid, Sanji, but if Luffy was still here, he had to be hungry, and Sanji fell to his knees, cold seeping through fabric into his skin as his eyes raked over the sorry state of the wicker basket. splintered and muddied and pathetic. In his desperation he had ruined the food. Because of course he fucking did. The Straw Hats were frowning. It really was a parallel to his experience with his mother all those years ago. Sanji's knuckles whitened as his fists dug into the grass. He shook with frustration. It didn't matter how weak Sanji was. Or how pathetic. Or how miserably he failed at things. Luffy was the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates because no matter who you were, even if you were some tragic chef, if he made a promise to you he would keep it. So, he had to be here. Sanji threw his head back, and with all the might he could muster he called out. Luff why. The wind was his only response, and Sanji's throat burned, strained, as he sucked in another shaky breath, preparing to yell again and again and again. He'd shout over the downpour 100,000 times if it meant somehow his captain would. A peculiar rumble tore through the air and through Sanji's thoughts, angry in its softness. The recognizable growl of an empty stomach, close by. Sanji shot to his feet. He heard it again and started to move, steps hesitant in their hope but quickly increasing in speed. Until there, just at the base of the massive fallen tree, Sanji saw him. The straw hat slung downward, black hair disheveled and matted to his skin. Clothes and skin torn, but washed away of blood. And Sanji's heart skipped and fell in equal measures because Luffy was here. Right where he said he'd be. Luffy laughed. Well, obviously. Quivering eyes blinked away the shock. It was in that moment, nose and eyes dripping their weepy contents down the most relieved smile Sanji had ever had, that the runaway prince realized his fears were hollow remnants of his own conceptions. This was the one person he should have known he never had to question. Never had to worry about. Because when nobody else was, Luffy would always be on his side. It wasn't a trick or a lie. Not with Luffy. Now you're getting it, bro, Frankie said, grinning. So, the stubborn determination Luffy always had for people had helped the idiot cook realize he had a true friend this whole time while leaving no room for his negativity to ruin it, Zoro thought. A small smile tugging at his lips. Nobody needed to know how disgustingly fond that made him of both his partner and his captain. If Zoro couldn't be the first to do it, he was glad it had been Luffy. Rubber idiot always was better at the kinda stuff anyway. Chopper clapped cheerily, eyes streaming. Maybe this triggered him to start trusting what he sees in the rest of us, too. He just wanted Sanji to know he loved him, okay? Sanji wobbled closer to the sleeping man, trying to shake off his initial relief as he took note how starved Luffy actually looked. Is that, Sanji? Leave it to the smell of food to immediately wake Luffy from unconsciousness. Luffy cackled at that. Hey, I knew you'd come back, but you sure took your time. At the sympathetic warmth of Luffy's smile, Sanji's face fell. Transitioned right back into a bitter mask of all the things he couldn't, now, and realizing just how true Luffy had always been only made Sanji think of the horrible things he had said and done to him in return. Everyone was frowning again. Nami clapped her palms together. Okay, when he does this in the future how are we going to smack him? Do we take turns, or… Hey, Luffy's smile faltered. What's the matter? Sanji had to get his vocal cords under control before he responded. You, moron. I didn't tell you to wait for me. Luffy only laughed again, riling Sanji's annoyance further. Why did you keep such a stupid promise? Look at you. Luffy's stomach rumbled in response, and Sanji placed the torn picnic basket at his feet. What did I expect, really? You don't like taking no for an answer, do you? Yeah, but, Luffy grinned wider, you still came back. Sanji grimaced. This was for Luffy, he reminded himself. He didn't want to get the rubber captain's hopes up, and he also wasn't going to be selfish and expect anything for himself from this. He didn't want the warmth of his friend when it was undeserved and would be gone soon anyway. Zoro glowered at the screen. The idiot cook might have finally fully accepted Luffy as his rightful nakama, but not himself as Luffy's. Sanji gestured to the meal. Eat whatever's salvageable. Luffy didn't need to be told twice. Dinner, the bento box was muddied and crushed. Sanji heard the pause in Luffy's movements and knew he had seen the mess Sanji had brought him. The bento box was muddied and falling to pieces. Sanji swallowed down his shame. I dropped it on the way here, he explained quietly. I suppose it's crushed. It was rained on, too. His thoughts are saying he doesn't care, But his actions are desperately trying to explain, Usopp noted, "Tis gang." The meat fell apart in Luffy's hands, leaving him nothing but bone, and Sanji's head lowered further and he turned away. It's just another failure. Luffy merely grabbed the soggy remains with grubby hands and went at it anyway. Food is food, Luffy said. And Sanji's food? He rubbed his stomach in a happy circle and licked his lips. A whole new level of food. Chopper agreed cheerfully. Robin smiled knowingly. If the odd parallel is continuing, I think we know how our captain is going to react to our chef's self-proclaimed failure. It's yummy, Luffy announced, a big smile encompassing his face. This is the best food ever. Sanji's narrowed eyes shot up at the rubber man over his shoulder. It's so good, he gasped, munching. Whoa, it's all our favorites in one lunchbox. You gotta make this for the whole crew. Oh man. He devoured it all in one sitting. Yum yum. Stop lying, Sanji grumbled, feeling like shit. He listened to Luffy lap up all the crumbs in delight. Are you done? Luffy said, stretching. Nobody makes a better lunchbox than you. Good. Then leave. Luffy froze. I'm staying here, Sanji informed him without moving. What do you mean? We're going back. I won't repeat myself. I won't go with you. Why not, Sanji tiredly plopped down on a nearby log, his back to Luffy, and held a finger up in the air. First, the captain of my own ship came all the way here for me. And not only did I insult and try to hurt him, but he also gave me no resistance whatsoever. That alone is more than enough reason for me not to return to your crew. Everyone pursed their lips. Normally perhaps, but in context. Secondly, remember the old geezer who saved my life? You know, the one I'm deeply indebted to? Well, he and the Bharati, the place I grew up, are being held hostage in case I run. That's also why I can't back out of the ceremony tomorrow. Chopper frowned. But Reiju said. Curly is set on staying, Zoro said. If he has another excuse, it'll help him feel like he's making the right choice. Even if his heart is split in two. Robin nodded and glanced at their little doctor. Even if he believes Zeph's safety is statistically valid, if he's going to stay anyway, then subconsciously he is aligning his actions with his values to make it easier on himself. Of course, Chopper realized. The more he thinks he's helping someone else, the easier it will be for him to keep fighting, because on some level he's aware that he cares more about the well-being of others over his own. The reindeer's eyes squiggled. It was so Sanji, and Sanji didn't even know it. Sanji held up a third finger. Reason 3, the evil family I'm related to is walking right into Big Mom's trap. They'll all be murdered in a matter of hours. Realistically, I know they're monsters. I don't owe them a thing. The thought of them makes me sick. But despite all that crap and the torment, Sanji's frown was as sharp as it was frustrated. I can't turn my back on those bastards. Because Sanji's not like them, Chopper said. Matter of fact, eyes still a wet mess. Too compassionate for his own good, Brooks supposed. But if there was any way to stick it to Vinsmoke Judge, I'd say acting off his emotions is the way to do it. Yo-ho. That's why, Sanji inwardly cursed. As he said it all out loud, he couldn't help how hopeless it all still felt. He was one person. But, God, he couldn't leave. I can't leave here with you. Sorry. I just can't. And there's no way to fix this. Irritation bubbled. So, there you have it, now get lost. Bro's stress is making him irritable again, Frankie murmured. At the last part, Luffy's eyes narrowed and he squared his feet. Without warning, he launched himself over the cook and on the other side of him so he'd be forced to face him, eyes blazing. Sanji startled. Before he could even blink, Luffy's fist collided with his cheek, arm stretching for extra velocity, pushing Sanji into the fallen tree trunk with a shattering smash. There's that sense Frankie wanted knocked into him, thought Zoro. Specks of debris soared. Sanji groaned from the dust as he tried to push himself up. He wiped at his bleeding mouth and locked eyes with his angry friend as Luffy moved closer to him, hands still balled into fists. Sanji prepared for a rebuttal, but Luffy wasn't backing down. The rubber captain was pissed. How do you really feel? He demanded, the harshness taking Sanji by surprise and faltering his resolve. Luffy was still seeing through him like he knew him better than anyone. Just say it, Sanji shook under Luffy's stare. He scrunched his eyes shut to break whatever spell he had on him, to crush down his emotion with only anger. He just wanted to be angry, because he was. At his family, at Big Mom. Behind his eyelids, however, he couldn't find the biting words he was looking for. He could only see his nakama. Luffy. Hey, Sanji. I'm hungry why, Nami. So, Sanji, what are you gonna make us today? Zoro. Get to cookin' already, you idiot. Nothing says true love like that, Frankie chortled, and Zoro chuckled. Tears flooded the blackness. Hey, Sanji, Usopp. I'm gonna catch us a huge score for dinner. Chopper. Yeah, it's coming, so get ready why. His lips pouted as he tried in vain to hold back whatever the hell this was. But his pain. It was getting the better of him. Or so, his longing. His yearning to take care of these people. To go back to them. To be with them. One super big portion for me. Thanks, Sanji. Looks good, thank you, Sanji. 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 Overloaded with memories of the people he cared for most, of the best times in his life, Sanji fell to his hands and knees before the captain. Like ominous omens, Big Mom and Vinsmoke Judge swam at the edges of his vision, and Sanji squeezed his eyes shut again, pushing out the pools of tears that had formed beneath his eyelids. It was all too much. He was out of his league, wasn't he? This was all. Fine, Luffy, Sanji sobbed, fringe falling over his eyes, fingers digging into dirt. I give up. It took him a second to catch his breath in order to form any kind of coherent sentence, and Luffy watched him with uncharacteristic patience. Sanji's hands shot up to grab at his S, feeling way too much, and he was so sick of it. If Luffy really wanted to know this fucking badly, if the universe was going to make him fucking say it. I'll be honest. What I want, Sanji choked. What I want is. Luffy braced himself. What I want. Sanji's gaze landed on Luffy's, blue wetter than the sea and shivering harder than the tides themselves. Is to go home, to the sunny. He said it, the crew thought simultaneously, faces softening. Sanji's head dropped in defeat, shoulders shaking with each tremble of a cry that escaped his clenched teeth. He sniffed. But I can't muster the courage to run away. Because the real courage is you staying, once the wedding begins. I can't stop any of it. Especially not on my own. He trailed off as his voice broke. He pressed his forehead to the cool grass in despair. I despise my whole family. They've always treated me like dirt. But he sniffed and raised his head to look Luffy directly in the eyes again. I still want to save those S-bags, he cried. Sanji knew it was stupid. He knew. He didn't have a reason other than it didn't feel right, he just. I get it. Sanji stiffened. Luffy was smiling. Shocked, Sanji watched as his hardened gaze softened to a warm understanding. That's who you are, Sanji. The Straw Hats couldn't help but smile and nod. Mouth agape as his breath hitched. Sanji could only stare. He searched the man in front of him for some kind of sign that he was lying, or at the very least, confused. But the man who looked back at him was the same one who chose him to be his chef from the very beginning. Eyes so genuinely warm and smile filled so much with love that Sanji didn't know where to put it all within his own heart. He swallowed. Then Luffy, with the utmost determination and zero hesitancy, assured Sanji with the words that flipped that self-isolated love cook from the inside out. You have us, Sanji, and we'll crash that party. For once, Sanji could do nothing but believe him. After everything, he really didn't have to do this alone. He could rely on his captain. His captain, the man he'd follow anywhere. Sanji stared up at him with one last look of disbelief before wiping his shimmering eyes and smiling incredulously through the tears. As if sensing the occasion, the rain ebbed. Rays of sunshine broke through the clouds, caressing the Straw Hat Captain as he walked over to his chosen chef with a satisfied smile. The storm was over. And Sanji's course was set. Sanji's gonna let us help him now, Chopper cried, eyes streaming with joy for the first time since this whole ordeal began. About time, Zoro said with a soft smirk. All the Straw Hats were their first senses of relief. No matter what hardships Sanji faced next, they felt his emotional headspace could only improve from here on out. There was no doubting Luffy anymore. And even if they acknowledged that it would take time for their cook to get used to that feeling completely, as well as to see the same devotion to him from the rest of the crew, The prospect that he was finally on the right track had increased exponentially. Teal-haired Reese sighed, watching the rowdy pirates with bored eyes. She twirled a stylus pen in her fingers. They're quite sentimental, aren't they? It's a pity they cherish someone so mentally unstable. Straw Hat smiles turned to veins popping in foreheads. Nami glared over at the woman. We can hear you, ya know? Reese's only response was a yawn as she swiveled back to her work. Ashvin shoved his glasses up with his thumb, the purple tint turning white in the glare of the monitors. A piteous underdog tale like this would inspire such mediocre pirates. Zoro's lip curled. Hey, Four Eyes. Wanna run that by us again? Mediocre? You do know we took out an Emperor of the Sea, right? Usopp said, chin-raising. Thanks to my hardy tactics and exceptional leadership. Tee-shee-shee-shee. And yet, here you all are, imprisoned guinea pigs. Hollowell tittered. I do enjoy our mouthier guests, however. You sure do know how to make me laugh, Tee-shee-shee. The pirates glowered at the scientists. On-screen, the outskirts of Sweet City glowed orange with the fresh light of the sun. Sanji sat against the large bark corpse of King Bomb, listening as Luffy filled him in on what had been happening on their end of things. He was more relieved than surprised to hear that Jinbei had come to help. Nami was in good hands, at least. However, the thought of the lovely navigator had Sanji's head drooping. It would be hard enough to see the others who had been forced to risk their lives because of him. We weren't forced, Chopper pouted. Brook put a bony hand to his chest. It was an honor to come to your aid, Sanji. But Nami had also witnessed what he'd done to their captain. He was too ashamed to ever face her after this, and he told Luffy as much. Who's gonna tell him we've all seen it now? Usopp said, making everyone grimace. They were all so busy processing the Sanji of the past and worrying about the Sanji of the present that none of them stopped to wonder how the Sanji of the future would likely react to all this intrusion. Welp, not it. Curly was not going to be happy about this. Zoro frowned. Hell, none of them would have liked this. Luffy only smiled gently at the cook. Things'll work out. Nami and the rest have been pretty worried about you. I don't know, idly, Sanji's fingers brushed through his fringe and gripped at the strands. His revealed cheek now sporting a bruise the size of Luffy's fist. I dragged everyone through hell and back. None of that was his fault, Nami sighed. We made our own decisions. Besides, I'd barely call it hell compared to what he went through. Luffy tilted his head at her in amusement. Yeah? Even when I was tearing my arms off and you were about to get tortured? Idiot rubber, stop reminding me of things. Before Luffy could respond, a wayward voice interrupted them, piercing through the silent air. Hey, Luffy. Both men froze. Hey, Luffy? Are you there? By the tree? Huh? Sanji stood as Luffy's lips began to curve upward. Is that Chopper? Right back in his good spirits, Luffy bounded in the direction Chopper's voice came from. When he eventually found its source, he grinned at it like he had just asked it to join his crew and it accepted. It was just a shard of broken glass. Oh, wow. We found you. The shard spoke. Nami was right. The Straw Hats who hadn't gone to whole cake quirked their brows in confusion. They wondered if this had to do with the mirror world Chopper had mentioned before, because nothing else made sense. Why is Chopper's voice coming from a mirror? Sanji asked. Well, Luffy rubbed the back of his head. It's kinda a long story, but they're all in another dimension right now. Sanji's jaw dropped. Are they safe in there? Zoro snorted, hit with a wave of fondness. The new dimension didn't concern him, only their safety. Hey, Chopper, Luffy called. You guys good? Chopper confirmed they were fine. Then Nami was suddenly in their ears. Luffy, was that Sanji? She asked excitedly. Sanji shrunk back at how happy she sounded. It had to be because Luffy had accomplished what he came for and now they could leave. Nothing to do with him personally. Nami rolled her eyes. He was hopeless. Luffy's eyes sparkled. He's here with me. Chopper was squealing again. It all worked out. You were able to find him, huh? Nice job? We did it. Carrot cheered. Yo ho 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 ho. Tell Sanji. The man in question braced himself. That we're all glad he's safe. Blue eyes shimmered in disbelief. They really were worried? About him? Yes, you silly goose, Brook chortled. They were still happy to have him back after all this? Sanji exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. A new smile took the place of his frown, soft and grateful and warm. He didn't exactly know how to handle these new emotions, but for now he figured it was best not to think too much about it. "Good call," Frankie said. But, of course, someone had to be the realist here, and it was Pedro. "While it's great you found Sanji," the jaguar mink said from the confines of the mirrored shard. "I hope things are settled." There was silence. Luffy's face shadowed. Being honest, not exactly. The shard shook. "What? So, here's the deal. We're crashing Big Mom's tea party and busting up Sanji's wedding," Luffy told them. "Plus, we're gonna save his family, too. After that, he's coming home for good." Sweat beaded at Sanji's temple. How would the others react to that? It was too much, wasn't it? It was his problem after all. "Sanji, my guy." Usopp waved his hand downward in a calming gesture. "Relax." Robin and Zoro chuckled. There was nothing but stunned silence on the other end at Luffy's declaration. The quiet was eating at Sanji's nerves. Finally, Chopper stuttered out, "Be Big Mom, huh?" The fear in the little reindeer's voice was evident, and Sanji grimaced, hating himself. No way. He couldn't put Chopper through this, not for his sake. Yeah," Luffy managed before Sanji interrupted with a hysterical shout. "No way. Look, she's much too strong for us. I would never risk your lives for my own problems. Okay." The cook stepped back shakily, arms raised like he was surrendering himself. Luffy was frowning at him but couldn't get a word out before the voices of the others were blasting through the shard. "Okay," they agreed unanimously. "Let's do it." Sanji and Luffy both fell over in shock. "You guys really laid on the suspense there," Frankie said with a snort. Had him quacking at the knees. "You know you can't do our bro like that. He'll super overthink it." "Big Mom is scary," Chopper wailed as an explanation. "But if it's for Sanji," he sniffed, "then it's worth it." Chopper was clearly bawling. Yep. Bawling. The Straw Hats thought, watching their youngest member's lips quiver in the present day, too. "It's fine. Whatever," the doctor blubbered. "I heard that you and Luffy got into a huge fight, Sanji, and I was so worried, you lug." "I'm so happy you Tia are returning," Carrot added. Brook's face scrunched into the piece of glass, skeletal fists rubbing at his tearful sockets. "You silly fool." Sanji was rendered speechless once again. They were more upset for making them worry about him than about risking their lives. "Because as Nakama we protect each other," Sanji, Luffy grinned. "Obviously it's a given." "So, basically we comes back." Nami sounded like she was smiling. "Okay." Nami, Sanji couldn't believe what he was hearing. From the one he was afraid of the most, no less. "Oh." Nami's voice grew instantly serious, and Sanji's stomach clenched. The mapmaker narrowed her eyes through the glass. "Don't think I'll let you off easy for freaking me out like that, Sanji." Sanji gulped, the hairs on his arms raising, and then, "I will never forgive you." Like a shot through his chest, it was exactly what he was fearing. "Ouch," Frankie said at the same time Usopp cried, "Nami, you killed him." The woman teased. Didn't they just tell her she had every right to be upset? And she had been? Still was on some level, honestly. But like Chopper said, Sanji was worth it. Plus, it didn't negate the fact she understood a lot better now. Nami sighed, easing up as abruptly as she had put her heel down. "But I can forget that for a moment. We're short on time. The tea party will be starting soon, and we are not leaving without you on board, Sanji, go that." The cook's heart came back alive. 1 beat. 2, she wasn't leaving without him. 3, 4, 5. Wah? Is that a marriage proposal? Yes, Nami? Usopp side-eyed the screen. "Ah, never mind. You actually just brought him back to normal." Strangely enough his dramatics didn't get on my nerves as much during all this. Guess I missed him being our Sanji. Nami shrugged. Honestly, though, how was that even close to a dumbest proposal I ever heard? Zoro grumbled. "It wasn't a proposal, jealous moron." Robin laughed as green and orange clashed in the cell next to hers. Her crew was so full of antics, even on-screen. Luffy stared at the wriggling love cook with pursed lips and narrowed eyes, his words an unimpressed monotone. "Niece, Sanji. You're back to normal. That's great." Lost in his moment of normalness, Sanji soared. Nami still wanted him back on the crew like the others. They were going to help him without Sanji even having to ask. They weren't just following Luffy's orders, either. They wanted to help him because they considered him part of their crew. He was their nakama. So, whether he deserved their kindness or not, he had it. He was never going to take his friends for granted again. He was so close, Usopp wheezed. Progress comes in steps, Robin assured him, still smiling warmly. He only stumbled at the end. With the new promise of his friends by his side, the memory warped into a wash of colors. Present-day Sanji's mind spun, picking out bits and pieces to present. A sporadic display of events in clipped motions. Jinbei's advice that provoking the wrath of an emperor of the sea required an alliance. The fire tank pirates coming into play, and Capon Bega's castle blinking onto the screen. Then a drawbridge, then inside, a bath, a meeting. Caesar clown. Gastino, Luffy cackled. What a funny guy. That's right. You did team up with Big and Caesar, didn't you? Robin mused. The latter triggered an array of emotions from Sanji that were clearly incited on Punk Hazard. A scientist experimenting on and manipulating caged children. Shed in a new light, memories of the icy hot hellscape of Punk Hazard widened the Straw Hat's eyes. Oh, realizations clicked. The Searstons they were dealing with here were dire, however. Sanji knew he had to subdue his feelings about the shit family he was resolved on saving for the sake of his crew. It was no time to be picky when it came to allies. The spinning colors of memories continued on. Big puffed dramatically at a cigar, and Luffy pounded a fist into his palm. 2 pirate crews, plus Caesar, had planned out a near-perfect window of time for their mission, and it all rested on the main bait, Luffy. Your plan rested on Luffy? Usopp gulped, watching his captain light up animatedly. I told Big to hide a mirror in the wedding cake. We lured all Big Mom's homies into the mirror world and then, bam! We came flying out of it, Luffy cackled hysterically. Is that the coolest way to make an entrance or what? It was so funny. Nami had her forehead pressed to her curled legs. I have no idea how we survive anything. Now, as the memory solidified, Sanji was stood at the edges of a velvet drape, the sunlight outlining his body in a soft glow. A white coat with gold embroidery stitched down the lapel hung from his stiff shoulders, falling to the back of his knees. A cream cravat was tucked into a silk vest, the milky white fabric blending into meticulously tailored slacks. Sanji rolled at the sleeves of his matching white dress shirt as he clipped on his cuff links and took one last calming drag of nicotine before the madness. This was it. His wedding. Zoro could feel his face twisting into a scowl. He wasn't a fan of that phrasing. Not without the context. And the cook looked so much like the perfect prince here that it hurt. Well, I'll still be alive, Sanji thought. But this is an emperor we're dealing with. Any way you slice it, this isn't gonna be pretty. The plan was set. Sanji would go through the ceremony as normal. Once he lifted Pudding's veil, she'd shoot him square in the head. He'd dodge. While everyone was distracted, Luffy would show up and break that picture of Big Mom's mother that would make the Emperor go crazy and let out her shrill hockey-encased scream. Luckily, their group would all have earplugs for that part. Then, while the guests were in a panic, Sanji and the crew would get Germa out of there and send them on their crappy way. Capone Big would attempt to assassinate Big Mom at that time, but that had nothing to do with the Straw Hats. In any case, it would be a race against time. Any mishap could end in their demise. Easy. Yeah, we were almost late, Luffy laughed. Because a certain rubber moron fell asleep after eating 10 times his weight in food and wouldn't wake up, Nami glowered. Of course, the gunshot seemed delayed anyway, Brook said. Chopper nodded as he remembered how anxious he was waiting for that awful gunshot to go off and nothing was happening. He kept fearing the pulsing of his rapidly increased heartbeat in his ears was going to make him miss the cue. The hardest part, for Sanji himself, wasn't the bullet or Big Mom. It was Pudding. Sanji grimaced at how ridiculous he was being. This was his second time making himself presentable because his bride was so good at her job. Why the hell did she have to be so cute? How was he supposed to see past those wide doe eyes of hers? You've gotta be shittin' me, Curly, Zoro groused. It was becoming increasingly more difficult for him to act normal. Of course, in this case perhaps, normal, was Sanji fawning over her, right? I mean, Bro's got a point there, Frankie acknowledged in their cook's defense. But if he let himself get too caught up in it, he might forget it was just an act. He knew himself well enough. He constantly wanted to give people the benefit of the doubt, especially beautiful women who he believed deserved the chance to be cherished. His mind would race to understand their actions. To defend them, even. He recalled when he first saw Pudding in her wedding gown. After being escorted to the waiting area, she had smiled at him. His heart had stuttered at the sight. He couldn't handle how beautiful she was. Couldn't process how that sweet innocence had transformed into a cold bully. Sanji? Pudding had asked, voice musical. When he had been quiet too long. He had swallowed down his nerves and peered down at her. Is something wrong? Sanji had forced out a laugh. No, nothing, just nervous, that's all. Me too, she had whispered back, sparkling, and Sanji hadn't thought he was going to make it. Through the entire waiting process, which seemed to take entirely too long as far as Sanji was concerned, he had been wrestling with himself. Stop, stop. It doesn't matter how cute she is. You've seen the truth. Don't be fooled. Stay cool. Stay cool. Don't fall for her charms. Get it together, you jackass. She's just acting. She's planning to shoot something wrong? Pudding had asked once again. No, he had cleared his throat. No, I was just thinking about our kiss. He tried to appear suave. And failing, Zoro grumbled incoherently, just because. I thought you might be shy doing it in front of all the people here. I could just kiss you on the forehead if you want. Pudding had winked and dragged her pinky across her bottom lip. Kiss me on the lips. Sanji had nearly died, nosebleed and all. To be fair, that was a pretty conniving move she pulled, Nami said. Perfect execution. Sanji stood no chance. Zoro was seething in his frustration. And that was what had brought him behind this curtain, changing once again and mentally preparing himself for what was to come, which was marrying a beautiful, cruel seductress. Said seductress shadow appeared on the other side of the curtain. Are you all ready to go, dear? Now she was calling him, dear. Zoro cursed at any higher being that was there and listening. Ready as I'll ever be, Sanji thought, pushing through the drapes and giving Pudding his best smile. Now, shall we? I can't wait, she said, smiling with him as he walked away. Then, quietly behind his back her third eye materialized, shimmering. Can't wait to blow your dumb brains out, it seemed to say. Usopp and Chopper shivered. That's crazy disconcerting, Frankie said. He still isn't aware she has a third eye, Robin remembered. Zoro honestly didn't think it would be a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Hell, the kinky cook would probably just added the list of reasons to drool over her. As the clock struck 12 noon, the wedding officially began, and the happy couple was introduced. The 35th daughter of Big Mom's family, Charlotte Pudding, and the third prince of the Germa Kingdom, Vinsmoke Sanji, will join their hands in marriage. Fireworks danced across the sky as the crowd cheered. The applause only grew as the bride and groom appeared above them in a giant teacup and saucer. They floated over the mirthful guests. Sanji's brothers pointed and laughed, and Pudding clung to Sanji's arm, making him acutely aware of her touch. He knew she was trying to keep him as flustered as possible. And it was working. Why was he so damn touch-starved? He moaned internally, and she's so soft. At least he's self-aware, Frankie muttered. Starved for touch? But I give him hugs all the time, Chopper remarked innocently. He looked up at Brook. You think I should give him more hugs? The skeleton nodded. Oh, absolutely. Zoro pinched the bridge of his nose with a heavy groan. He couldn't handle how gentle she was with him. Couldn't handle how beautiful she looked every time she gazed up through her lashes. And, sure, she was evil. That didn't mean he couldn't look, though, right? He had fawned over plenty of women on the opposing side before. Nothing wrong with that. As the ceremony took off, his thought process continued on its path of back and forth. He could barely keep up with the priest as he begged himself to keep his wits about him. He didn't want to be here. Didn't want this to be his wedding. He'd always dreamt of a ceremony like this, but it was drastically different. Far less pink, far less Germa, and definitely didn't involve as many conspiracies. Ah, yes, Usopp said, nodding wisely. Some conspiracies, surely, just not as many. His friends would all be there by his side, supporting him along with Zeph and the Bharati cooks. The faceless brides he imagined changed from day to day. There were even some tailored suits thrown in the mix eventually, but most of those faceless grooms had a head of mossy hair and the Straw Hats weren't entirely surprised someone like Sanji had thought of these things, but they did try to mask their amusement as a particular swordsman glowed beet red under his head of mossy hair. The heat creeping up Sanji's neck at where his thoughts were taking him in such a crucial moment slapped him back to reality. This wasn't a real wedding, so he had to get a grip. He couldn't blow this just because a beautiful woman was in front of him and looking at him like that. Like there was love there and fuck. He'd wanted someone to look at him like that for so long. Sympathetic frowns returned. That was the real kicker here, wasn't it? In any other Searstance, this would be a dream for Sanji. Here, it was nothing short of a nightmare. Every single aspect of whole cake silently polluted Sanji's dreams and aspirations while he unknowingly continued to breathe them in. His only option was to suffocate. Fake or not, what if Sanji never got a chance to see that look aimed at him again? God, Zoro hoped Curly had seen that look again. Hoped he realized every time he locked eyes with him. Sanji was busy hating himself, equally self-aware and ready to throw himself over to the wolves if the wolves looked like pudding, until finally the priest said the words he'd been waiting for. You may lift the veil and kiss the bride. Pudding slowly kneeled. Usopp leaned in. Oh, here we go, he's going to see the eye, Chopper whispered anxiously. Brook hummed. It's going to be a real eye-opener, yo-ho. Heart pounding in his ears, Sanji reached for the hem. He lifted the tool carefully. As its edges cleared Pudding's rosy cheeks, she smirked. And when it was completely out of the way, her eyes shot open, all three of them. Sanji leaned back, pupils withering with a shudder at the revelation. He was expecting a gun, not. Pudding watched his expression in earnest, and her grin sharpened. Her pistol clicked behind her back as she brought it forward, raising the barrel of the gun to Sanji's shocked, blushing face. Blushing? The crew was puzzled for a moment, except Zoro. Called it. There was a swift pause as Pudding clearly waited to hear what glorious last words he had to say. Sanji swallowed. To think that you would hide such a beautiful eye. WHAAA? All this time, there weren't merely two eyes as warm as melted milk chocolate, but three? He likes it, Usopp and Chopper shrieked. I mean, there are weirder things out there. We've seen him. Just didn't think Sanji would be attracted to it, Frankie muttered. It's just an eye, Robin chuckled. She made extra eyes all the time. Perhaps it was Pudding's toxic lean toward trickery that put them off. Pudding's third eye blinked. All three widened. The pistol began to shake, and Sanji came back to his senses. Was she going to shoot? As if in slow motion, the weapon fell from her grasp. It clanged to the floor. Tears pooled within three striking eyes and Pudding's whispered voice trembled. What? Sanji backtracked. I'm sorry. I shouldn't stare. It's just, your eyes are so pretty. He was rambling now, confused and thrown way off guard. Are you okay? He asked instead, because wasn't she supposed to shoot him? Pudding's lips quivered. Screw you, she hissed, suddenly falling to her knees. She sobbed into her hands. Sanji balked. Why had he made her cry? Why did he keep making women cry? Even his enemy, he couldn't stand to see a lady hurting like this. Pudding, you go to hell. She cried back. I know I'm a freak. Is this pity? Damn it. It's beautiful. How dare you tell me that? I see, Robin said. I don't think Pudding's ever received a warm response to her third eye before. By her own words, it's likely she was bullied, Nami agreed. Sanji's tenderness threw her off guard and was exactly what she needed to hear in her life, the archaeologist said, smiling knowingly. In which case? It was the cook's kindness that ended up saving him, Zoro finished calmly. Chopper gasped. That must be why she helps us later, too. Another defected to his side? Frankie was weeping. Sanji's passion is unstoppable. Luffy smiled broadly like the proud captain that he was. Sanji leaned towards the girl now, concerned. This wasn't like either of the two Puddings he knew. The good nor the evil. What's wrong? He asked. The Charlottes were scrambling to rectify Pudding's mistake. Big Mom signaled for the priest to off Sanji instead, and the man pulled his own gun out and aimed. Sanji's senses stirred. The shot that was fired didn't come from the priest, however, and Sanji barely stumbled back in time to dodge the strange bullet that came from the complete opposite direction. The candy jacket collided into the priest's forehead instead, and the man's gun went off into the sky, igniting the chaos. Teacups crashed. Plates clattered. Murmuring was everywhere as panic rose and set. "What is going on here?" Vinsmoke Judge demanded. The altar rumbled. Sanji didn't know whether to leave Pudding or not, but all instincts screamed at him that she was too vulnerable right now to leave behind. That her current state of helplessness could get her injured. As he scooped her in his arms, the wedding cake detonated. Frosting flew in every direction, and hundreds of Straw Hat Luffys sprang forth, leaping into the crowd. His antics took their natural course, and pandemonium ensued. Luffy pumped his fist in the air. Time to take Sanji back.